Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would ever be having a conversation like this. When it first happened, I couldn't talk about it at all. It was just too raw, too painful. It took me many, many years to finally get to the point where I could talk about this. It was time to finally stop trying to hide from it and bury it. It was time to just get it out in the open and deal with it. I stopped calling my mother Mom many, many years ago. Now she's just Stephanie.
No.
Tomorrow will be 7 years to the day since I saw her last. And I'm perfectly okay with it.
This came for you.
Let her rot. If she dies in prison, all the better. I never knew what normal was. Everybody keeps trying to tell me, this is normal or that is normal. I don't know what normal is. All I know is how I grew up. Didn't see much of Dad growing up because he was always working. Mostly what he did, and he loved doing, was he worked on naval ships. He spent many, many years doing what he had to do to provide for us. So it's just me at the house with Stephanie and the girls, Guinevere and Ruby Grace. Stephanie's priority was always Stephanie first.
Hey, Carol.
The public face was this perfect wife, perfect mother. And then the private face was, she was a master manipulator. She just hid behind that holier-than-thou Christian image.
Hi, how's it going?
Stephanie was all about looking the part. She never actually wanted to play the part. Our relationship with Stephanie was always, as far back as I can remember, was always more of at arm's length. And when I got old enough, Stephanie had started sending me on errands to the little Jiffy store, grabbing a gallon of milk or a carton of eggs.
Honey, don't forget the milk.
Okay, Mom.
One day, borrowed one of my sister's scooters, and I'm not used to the scooter, okay? Come down the hill and we gotta make a turn to get to the store. Well, I turned the handle a little too tight and it just came out from under me. Took a huge chunk out, okay? Bleeding all over the place. Run back to the house. And Stephanie sees the blood and she's like, what happened?
Did you get the milk? What happened?
I fell off the scooter.
Didn't care a damn bit. And the blood running down my leg. Oh, okay. What was it?
It hurts.
Well, you know where the Band-Aids are. Go clean yourself up.
Stephanie really, I don't know if it was more disinterest or just meh. She certainly cared less for me as she did for the girls. There never was any real close relationship between us that I can remember. The traveling growing up started about 9. We really didn't stay in one place too long.
Come on, kids. I want to get everything packed up before your father gets home.
Dad was always working, so during the day, We'd be packing, just taking boxes, packing stuff up.
Josh, when you're done in here, I want you packing up the kitchen.
We were never really given a reason. We weren't told why. We were just told, hey, start packing.
I don't understand why we're moving.
Because we are.
I didn't know it at the time, but Stephanie was the reason we moved. Usually what it was she would blow through the money and she wouldn't pay the bills. So about the time the debt collector started calling, or the light company was getting ready to shut off the lights, or the landlord came knocking, we're moving again. Stephanie's uncontrollable spending was a constant issue at the house between her and Dad. But Dad would go along with it to try to keep the peace in the house. We went from New Orleans to Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and then we moved to Virginia Beach. About 4 to 6 months we'd be in one spot, and then Stephanie would blow through the money, wouldn't pay the bills. Time to go. None of the arguments were ever in front of us. They were always behind closed doors after we had been sent to bed. He tried many times to teach her, you know, you gotta take care of the bills, then you can do whatever.
I don't want to hear it from now on. I'll just do it myself.
And for the next 3 hours, all you heard was screaming and hollering.
What am I supposed to do?
We could just hear the raised voices and all the shouting.
That's it. No more shots.
You're the one who's supposed to be
No!
One day I asked Dad, why is Mommy being so mean? And the way he explained it to me was that he wasn't giving her as much money as he had been because he was making sure the bills were paid. I was in math class when she picked me up. Stephanie and Gwen and Gracie, all three of them. I asked, hey, what's going on? Why are you picking me up? Like, don't worry about it, just get in the car. So I get in the car and we go. And we drive the hour and a half to Green Cove Springs. We pull up in front of this iron gate. I'm like, where are we and what are we doing here? I wasn't told what the place was until we got inside.
Right here.
When you first arrive, there's like 3 or 4 employees. One interviews the woman, and 2 more interview the children. And she's like, do you know why you're here? I don't even know where here is. What is this place?
Well, this is a women's shelter.
What's that?
What are you talking about? Women's shelter for what? It was a shelter for abused women.
Why would we be here?
Have you ever seen your dad hit your mom?
No,
But they argue a lot, don't they?
What?
I guess.
I told the employee that if this is a domestic violence shelter, there's no reason for us to be here. My dad isn't abusive. So, I don't know why we're here.
My dad wouldn't hit anyone.
That's not what your mom says.
I was not happy about this at all.
Look, why don't we get you settled in and we can talk more later?
But I didn't have any contact with Dad. I didn't have any way of getting a hold of him. He was working a job in Mississippi. So, make the best of it. The end of the 3.5 weeks, and we went home and everything's hunky-dory again. The only reason we even went to the women's shelter was a manipulation tactic for Stephanie to get more money each week out of Dad. It worked, I guess. We almost had to rush him to the hospital. We think think that was one of the first times that Stephanie tried to poison Dad. Stephanie. I'm not even gonna touch that one. I don't want nothing to do with that bitch. That's the first time I've seen that face since I went and saw her in jail. That's her trying to put on the normal, decent person face for the rest of the world. Trying to hide those dirty little skeletons. Trying to make it seem like she's not the bad person that she really turned out to be. Stephanie never changed her spending habits. She would always just blow through money. They would easily go and spend $600-700 worth of stuff.
Hey guys, what's all this?
I really didn't understand Gwen and Stephanie's relationship. Stephanie's priority was always Stephanie first. And then Gwen came in, then Gracie, then me at the bottom. If Gwen and I ended up wanting the same item, Gwen would get it before I would. Stephanie was definitely grooming Gwen. There'd just be piles of stuff, and we kept running out of money.
Oh, so pretty.
What's going on?
It's not a big deal.
And finally, Dad took control of the finances.
I don't know what else to do.
What do you think you're doing?
Just stop.
William!
He would hand her money to go buy groceries, and that was all she would get. He even took her bank card.
You'll get him back when you need him.
She wasn't happy about it. Everybody always says, you know, with that exasperated tone, oh, I'm gonna kill him. But you don't actually mean you're gonna go and kill him. I don't think he realized just how far she'd be willing to go. It really was just a regular night. We ate dinner and it was only like an hour later, and I was in my room playing on my computer, and I heard him fly off of the couch. All I hear is pounding footsteps, head for the bathroom, and then as someone's throwing up. I just poked my head out and asked, well, what's going on? You know, is everybody okay?
Dad, you all right?
Everything's okay, honey. Your dad's just not feeling very well.
And Stephanie just poked her head out and said, no, everything's fine. Your dad just got sick, that's all. Didn't think nothing of it. I mean, I'd been sick a few weeks before throwing up. It was just a 24-hour stomach bug. But he was in there for 3 hours straight. And he spent 2 days hugging that toilet. He couldn't even go to work. And he actually must have lost 15, 20 pounds in those 2 days. It was bad. We almost had to rush him to the hospital. We think that was one of the first times that Stephanie tried to poison Dad. We don't have any proof. We don't have anything but just suspicion that it was poison. But Dad very, very rarely got sick. And nobody else got sick. He was the only one that got sick. I get up one day and Dad is actually home. He had taken a week off. He asked me, hey, run out to the shed and go grab a razor for me. Okay, sure.
Here you go. Thank you.
When I walked into the bedroom behind him and saw the burn mark, I'm like, what happened?
What's that?
Oh, your mom dropped a candle last night. Burned the carpet. Come on, help me cut this out.
Oh, yeah, wait.
The explanation she gave Dad was that, she just lit one of her smell good candles and was going to put it on the dresser. Dropped the candle on the floor. But I don't know if he realized what she was trying to do. After everything happened, I found out that Stephanie had actually told a family friend. Dad was asleep that night, and she tried to light the sheets on fire with the candle while he was in the bed. And apparently, he had made a noise, so he had probably started snoring real loud again. And she jumped, candle goes flying and burns the carpet. If she'd have managed it, and Dad hadn't woken up, he'd have been burned alive, and the house would have probably gone up too. She heard me coming, and as soon as my foot had touched the linoleum, she snatched that knife up and just came at me with it. And there's Dad. And you can tell from this picture, he's pretty happy. And that's not a fake smile. If Dad did anything wrong, it's that he tried to help too much. He never tried to take advantage of anybody. He always tried to, treat everybody fairly. And that was the greatest lesson that he imparted. Was, be the best person that you can be to everybody you meet. He was a stand-up guy. Before I turned 18, as my independence came out stronger and stronger, she responded by trying to be more controlling. We'd gotten up that morning, and just like any other day, we ate breakfast, and she throws down a pink piece of paper in front of me.
What's this?
It's been coming for a long time. Now sign it.
It's a restraining order against Dad. Dad was always working, so I never really got to see that much of it.
No,
Yes!
I'm not signing this. I'm not going anywhere.
I am your mother.
I'm like, no, go away. I don't want to hear it. She was always using us kids against Dad. Because she knew he was never around. Dad was the closest thing to a real friend I had for most of my life. And I didn't want to lose that. And I knew if I went with her, I was going to lose that.
You will do what I tell you to do as long as you live here.
And she's just screaming at me.
Sign the damn paper.
No, I'm not signing.
I tried to walk out and remove myself, de-escalate the situation, do the right thing. As soon as I did that, she started swinging on me.
Sign it!
No!
She never acted like that towards Gwen Gracie. And I don't know why. I don't know where all this anger kept coming from, but I was starting to think for myself a lot more than she liked. So she was trying to do what she could to kind of whip me back in line, and it wasn't working.
Josh!
She couldn't control how I thought. I went into the kitchen to grab a drink of water. And she heard me coming. And as soon as my foot touched the linoleum, she snatched that knife up and just came at me with it. She had never done anything like that toward me before, so it was completely unexpected.
Mom.
I had to run before she could get to me. Haul ass back across the house, back to my room. Slam my door, throw my chest of drawers in front of it to keep her from following me in. And she just stood there at the door, screaming and pounding on it, trying to bust it down. I don't know what her intentions were. I don't know if she was actually going to stab me or just cut me or try to scare me. I don't know. All I knew was probably time to get the hell out of Dodge. Popped out my window, took off. I know I can crash somewhere else for a couple of days and let everything cool down for a little bit. I didn't think anything of it until I got out of the house. Finally caught my breath, calmed down. This crazy just tried to kill me. I knew Dad was coming home that weekend. I just had to wait it out a couple of days. And I knew once Dad got home, everything was gonna be okay. So he came and got me, and I explained it to him. And he asked, "You want to go into town to make a police report?"
You want to press charges?
No, I wouldn't do anything anyway. It's my word against hers, there's no point. Well, nothing will come of it. And probably my sister's word against mine as well. Gwen and Stephanie were always teaming up against me. Anytime Stephanie was giving her side of a story, Gwen would usually backed up Stephanie's side. Gwen and Stephanie really got close. It had kind of become them against me.
I'm sorry, Josh. You don't have to apologize. It's not your fault.
So there was nothing we could do. We just went home. Either I was gonna end up in jail or she was gonna end up in the ground. And I didn't want either of those to happen. So I'm like, okay, I need to get out of here. Best way to do that, join the service. This was while I was still in training. I'd finally gotten away from all the crap back home. Well, when I left, I didn't look back. It worked out pretty good for a while. My cousin had sent me a message saying, "Hey, you need to call home. There's been a death in the family." This was totally out of left field. None of us saw it coming. None of us expected it. I loved being in the Army. I really did. In Iraq, and I know everybody watching this is gonna say some crap about what I'm about to say, but Iraq was the easiest and best time of my life. Swear to God. My base was the hardest hit. We were the one that was attacked the most out of all of our bases in the Middle East. You got bombs going off everywhere. There's always someone trying to kill you. And even with all of that craziness, all that confusion, still 1,000 times better than what I grew up with. If someone shot at me, I could shoot back. Growing up, I couldn't grab a knife and chase her with it. No matter what, no matter how bad Iraq got, always knew I had someone watching my back. first year in service, every payday, she'd call me.
Steve.
She wouldn't call me any other time.
Hey.
Hey, Josh, it's Mom. It's good to hear your voice.
She would start with the standard pleasantries.
So how are you? Are you staying safe?
Yep. Everything's all right.
Oh, that's good.
And inevitably, she'd ask for money.
Anyway, things here are a little rough.
I knew better because I knew Dad was taking care of the bills. No, I'm not sending you anything. I wasn't gonna be another payday for her.
No, I'm not sending you anything.
She tried to do the I love you thing, trying to manipulate to get more money.
Josh, baby, you don't understand.
The conversation would just devolve from there, and I'd end up hanging up on her.
Don't be that way, Josh.
I gotta go.
And that'd be it for 3-4 weeks. And then phone rings.
What do you want?
The bills are piling up here.
I got tired of it. Look, quit talking to me. I'm done. Don't call me again.
I'm not sending you any money.
Josh.
Bye.
Josh.
After all the crap I put up with for 18 years? No, you're not gonna swindle me like that. I was on base at the time, and we had Wi-Fi set up around our work areas. And my cousin had sent me a message saying, hey, you need to call home. There's been a death in the family. Both of my uncles and my grandfather had been having health issues, so I figured it must be one of them. Called my uncle. He's like, you sitting down? Yeah, what's going on? Who died? Your dad did. What? And the police are thinking murder. They're thinking homicide. It was with a pickaxe. It looked like a robbery gone wrong.
I gotta go.
It took everything in me, every bit of strength I had from everything I'd been through, to hold myself together, walk outside of my room, stick a cigarette in my mouth, and I didn't even get to light it. I lost it. Collapsed right there. Just broke down. And I sat there for a good 10 minutes. And then another sergeant, she saw me there just bawling my eyes out. She's like, are you okay?
Hey.
Just found out my dad died. Come on, let's get you up, get you back together, get you home.
We're gonna pack your bags and we're gonna put you on a flight back to the US, okay?
Anytime you go overseas, you're routed through Kuwait. When I finally got to Kuwait, I went to the media room to get on Facebook. And as soon as I logged in, the very first thing on my newsfeed was the updated story. My stomach dropped. Stephanie killed him, and she'd ended up arrested. It took a little bit to sink in. I had to read the story 3-4 times to really grasp it and realize what was going on, what it was saying. This was totally out of left field. None of us saw it coming. None of us expected it. picture with it was Gwen and Stephanie's mugshots. It was her and my sister that had killed my dad. She made Gwen do it. This is one of the very few photos of me and him together. For many, many years, he was my only friend. I'll never get to see him again. Even now, 7 years later, it's still that loss is still pretty strong. And the mugshots. Shocking would be an understatement. Felt like a sucker punch to the gut, honestly. Bad enough with knowing that I'd lost my dad, but then finding out that it was the two people that were supposed to be closest to him that were the ones that did it. Just mind-boggling. Before the funeral, we discussed whether or not we wanted to view the body. Because when Gwen and Stephanie killed him, Gwen grabbed his pickaxe, went into his bedroom, and hit him with it 5 times.
Was he asleep? Did you hit him anywhere other than the head?
In the chest.
With, what were you hitting him with in the chest? The axe. Why were you hitting him in the chest?
Because he kept making noises that sounded like he was snoring.
So you're
Freaking
trying
out. I didn't know what I was doing. I was so scared.
The police, when they did their investigation, could never prove that Stephanie was in the room when Gwen swung the pickaxe. But even to this day, I maintain Stephanie had to be in that room. Because if she wasn't, Gwen would have never gone through with it. Apparently Stephanie had been planning this for a very, very long time. Like years. And her original plan was to get me to do it. And I'd take the blame. But when My Independent Street came out and she realized she couldn't mold me and shape me to do it, she started grooming Gwen to do it. They did the deed that Wednesday night, and then they came back the next morning and acted like they had found Dad like that.
I want you to tell me, is he breathing? So he's not conscious and he's not breathing? Okay. What's all over the bed, honey?
This was taken outside of the crime scene. Person in the center is Stephanie, trying to act all hurt and confused about what had happened. At first glance, you would think this is just a grieving widow. I could see where, if you didn't know Stephanie and you didn't know her history, I could see where you could be fooled by that. And this would be one of the crime scene photos. That was Dad's living room. Gwen and Stephanie didn't do half a bad job of tossing the place, making it seem like it was a robbery gone wrong. the reason they got caught was because there was no sign of forced entry. The great irony of this whole thing, they were like addicted to crime drama shows. Every time someone would get caught, especially for that particular reason, they would always say, I would never be that stupid. I'd never get caught for a reason like that. And then they go and do it. If she ever sees this, I know she's gonna take offense to it. I don't give a damn. The only reason I went was because I was trying to get answers that nobody else could get, that even her attorney couldn't get. My visit with Stephanie did not last long. It only lasted about 45 minutes. And I told her straight up, the only reason I'm here, I want to know why. She wouldn't tell me anything. I asked her again, why would you do this? And that's when she started trying to make it out to be my fault because I wouldn't send her money.
You didn't help at all.
None of this would have happened if you'd have given me money.
What did you expect?
And the longer I sat there and the longer I looked at her, and the more crap that spewed out of her mouth, the angrier and angrier I became.
Josh.
I left because I was starting to get into such a rage that if I didn't leave when I did, I was going to end up getting arrested myself for trying to go through the glass and get my hands on her. Haven't spoken to her, haven't gone to see her, have had nothing to do with her since. But the visit with Gwen was a lot more heartbreaking. As soon as she saw me, she started crying. And the whole time, all she could say was that she was sorry. I tried to ask Gwen why. I tried to get past all the tears, but she couldn't stop crying. I got a few letters from her here and there, but nothing ever explained anything. It's been 7 years. It's about time for some answers.
Everything had nothing. Then plenty of money. He had $6 grand. $6 grand. You know how much he gave us? $400. Our lights were about to be turned off. We have no car insurance. And there's nothing.
This is supposed to be someone who's caring for you.
Yes. I had no choice. I had to do it.
That took a twist I wasn't expecting. He did not actually have the $6 grand. And he gave Stephanie most of what he got. He kept just enough to keep his lights on and to buy food. For several years after it first happened, I used the term brainwashed. And honestly, I seriously believe that, yeah, she was. That was definitely Stephanie talking. Gwen always had more loyalty than she did smarts. If I had managed to somehow convince Gwen to get out of that house, Dad would be alive, and we'd all have been better for it. I don't think Gwen should have gotten quite as long. She is a guilty party because she did commit the physical act, but she is also a victim as well because of Stephanie's manipulation and her mind warping and her abuse. As far as Stephanie, not long enough. Unless we get lucky and she happens to die in there, not long enough. I beat myself up for many years with what ifs. What if I'd been there? What if I'd seen some? What if I'd paid more attention? What if I had done more to get Gwen and Gracie out of there? Gracie, she and I aren't close anymore. We talk here and there. I really don't know if we'll ever actually be close or not. I know I've got PTSD, and I know it's not strictly service related. I know that this event and everything that happened while growing up definitely contributed to it. I've learned how to kind of cage my anger, keep it under wraps, but my therapist told me, look, you know, you can keep it caged all you want, but eventually that cage is going to break. And when it does, it's not going to be pretty. That was what took the longest out of everything, was learning how to process my emotions. I've gotten better at it, but it's still a struggle even now. That's kind of part of what made me choose to do this. And it has. This has definitely helped. It's been oddly therapeutic. When I say I've forgiven Stephanie, I haven't so much forgiven as just let go. I learned a long time ago that, harboring hatred and resentment like that doesn't hurt the other person, it just destroys you from the inside out. I'm sorry, I want more for myself. I'm still here, I'm still
Chicago still remembers the night the city swallowed a scream and never returned it. It was late September of 2001, the kind of night when the wind didn't just blow past the buildings. It slithered through the alleys like something alive, cold, hungry, waiting. A college student hurrying home spotted something in the dark, something that made her stop even though every instinct told her to run. A glint on the pavement, a smear leading toward the abandoned loading dock behind Halstead Street. A place where the lights never stayed on long and where the shadows felt thicker than they should. She approached anyway, because curiosity has a strange way of defeating fear, especially in Chicago, a city raised on the edge of danger. What she saw would become the opening line of a mystery that haunted detectives for more than 2 decades. A torn backpack, its zipper ripped clean off, and next to it, a single shoe, small, white, speckled with blood that looked almost black under the street lamp. That was the moment the Chicago 2001 cold case began, a headline that would later rattle the police force. But that night, it was just a quiet nightmare, unfolding in real time. Officers arrived minutes later, red and blue lights crashing against the warehouse walls as they cordoned off the narrow loading bay. There was no body, no sign of the victim, just the suggestion of a violent struggle smeared across the concrete like a cruel signature. The missing girl's name was Danielle Royce, 22, studying forensic science at UIC, the kind of student whose professors predicted a bright future, and whose friends described her as the person who always walked others home, even when she herself was tired. Irony, the bitter kind, would become a recurring note in the story, an aspiring investigator disappearing under circumstances she herself might have once tried to solve. That night, her friends waited outside the police tape, huddled in a trembling cluster, but none could offer anything except confusion and a chorus of "She never walked alone." She always texted when she was close. She said she wasn't scared of this neighborhood. But the city knew fear doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives silently, slipping out of the dark like a hand over your mouth. Detectives fanned out, knocking on doors, interviewing night shift workers, lining up the usual suspects. A taxi driver reported hearing a cry, sharp and short, as if cut off mid-syllable. A warehouse guard claimed he saw a dark sedan speeding away, though he couldn't identify the model or plate, only the shape of its taillights burning like 2 red eyes disappearing into the night. A bartender closing shop swore she saw Danielle walking fast, head down, clutching her phone right before midnight. Everything overlapped, but nothing fit, like mismatched puzzle pieces from different boxes. The city held its breath, and for a moment people whispered that maybe this would be solved quickly. Chicago had seen worse after all. But the case didn't unfold like a familiar tragedy. It unraveled like a vanishing act. Hours after the discovery of her belongings, police found a streak of blood leading toward a drainage tunnel beneath the old railroad tracks. Down there, the air smelled like rust and forgotten things, and every drip of water echoed like a warning. Officers followed the trail with flashlights, beams slicing through the darkness until they reached a corner where the concrete turned damp and the graffiti turned violent. There, on the wall, smeared by hand, was a pattern of 3 short streaks, finger marks, dragged downward as if someone had gripped the wall in desperation. They tested the blood. It was Danielle's. That was the moment the investigation shifted from missing person to probable abduction, and Chicago's collective pulse tightened. But the tunnel offered no more clues, no fibers, no footprints, no body. It was as if the city itself had decided to keep her secret. Days stretched into weeks, and the police released every description they had, but tips dried up faster than rain on asphalt. News outlets ran the headline, UIC student vanishes, cold case fears rise, a precursor to the chilling phrase that would dominate front pages years later. Danielle's family plastered her photos around the city, the kind where the flash reflects just enough in the eyes to make her look alive, hopeful, unaware that her image would become a symbol for a case that refused to move. Candlelight vigils lit up the campus, and for a moment, the community united in shared fear, wondering if the city had grown darker without anyone noticing. But solidarity fades when answers don't come. The city moved on, the headlines shifted, the world turned its attention elsewhere. Danielle's case slid quietly into the drawer labeled Unsolved, where it remained like a restless ghost waiting to be acknowledged. For detectives, the real torture wasn't just the lack of evidence, it was the abundance of almost evidence. A smudged fingerprint on the torn backpack strap, too distorted to match. Fibers on the pavement, but too common to trace. A witness who thought he saw a figure dragging something heavy behind the warehouse, but later admitted he might have been drunk. Every lead felt like a door that slammed shut the moment they touched it. And overshadowing everything was the date, September 2001. Chicago, like the rest of the nation, was reeling from events larger than itself. Resources stretched thin, media swallowed by global tragedy. A single disappearance could not compete for attention. The timeline of her case was almost cursed by circumstance. But even as official focus waned, there were detectives who couldn't let it go. One of them was Detective Marcus Hale, a veteran known for his bulldog persistence, the kind who didn't believe in coincidences or dead ends. He reviewed the case files relentlessly, revisiting the alley, rewalking the path Danielle would have taken, whispering to himself that someone had seen something. They just didn't know it mattered yet. Hale became the quiet guardian of the cold case, updating it year after year, waiting for the world to shift just enough for a clue to fall into place. He didn't know then that the break would come more than 2 decades later, triggered by something so small, so seemingly irrelevant, that it would feel almost cruel in its simplicity. But in 2001, standing in that dimly lit interrogation room, Hale stared at the last piece of evidence collected, a scrap of cloth found snagged on a chain-link fence near the warehouse. Black fabric, smooth, expensive, not part of Danielle's clothing. Tests revealed nothing conclusive, no blood, no unique fibers, no traceable manufacturer. It was just a fragment, a sliver of possibility. Hale held it, turned it between his fingers, and said quietly, "Someone brushed past this fence in a hurry." But no one else saw meaning in it. The fragment was bagged, logged, and buried in the archives where dust settled over it like a burial shroud. As winter rolled in, Chicago froze over both literally and figuratively. Snow covered the alley where Danielle vanished, erasing the last hints of a struggle. Students returned to classes, reporters moved on. Even the flyer on the lamppost began to peel at the edges, her face bending with the wind until one day it simply tore off and fluttered away. That was how the case faded, piece by piece, like a memory dissolving. But every year, Hale marked the anniversary of her disappearance, opening the file again, reading it from the beginning, refusing to accept the silence. What he didn't know was that the city itself had preserved something without meaning to, something hidden in its depths, waiting for the right moment to resurface and rip open the past in a way no one expected. Because the Chicago 2001 cold case was never truly dormant, it was simmering, breathing, gathering its storm. And the first crack in the silence would come from a place no one had ever thought to look. It began with a storm drain on the south side, a place so ordinary that thousands of people stepped over it every week without a second glance. A city worker clearing debris after heavy rainfall noticed something lodged between the metal grates. A small, waterlogged evidence pouch, the kind used by police but long discontinued. Inside was a single cotton swab, its label almost erased by time, its barcode unreadable, its origin a mystery. The worker assumed it was trash until he saw the faded letters printed along the plastic. CPD property, do not discard. He hesitated only a second before turning it in, unaware that he had just handed detectives the fuse that would ignite a 22-year-old nightmare. When the evidence arrived at the precinct, no one recognized the packaging. The label was too damaged, the ink too blurred. It looked like something that had fallen through a crack in the world and resurfaced by accident. The property clerk entered it into the system automatically, but the software flagged it. Unknown case file, no matching record. That alone raised eyebrows. Evidence always belonged to something. It didn't just appear. A missing link meant a missing chain, and in police work, missing chains were dangerous. The clerk forwarded it to Detective Marcus Hale with a simple note. This might interest you. Hale studied the pouch under the lamplight of his office, the rain tapping the window behind him like impatient fingers. There was something familiar about the handwriting on the ruined label, the slanted letters, the pressure marks. He had seen that style before, in old case logs, in archived property sheets, in the scrawled notes of officers who had been rookies before he even joined the force. And there, almost invisible, was one word that survived the water damage. Royce. His pulse tightened. A whisper of memory returned like a blade through fog. Danielle, the alley, the torn backpack, the cold case he'd carried like a scar beneath his uniform. He stared at the pouch as if it were a message sent across decades. He logged it, processed it, and sent the swab for DNA analysis, not because he expected anything, but because instinct tugged at him in a way reason couldn't dismiss. He'd learned long ago that cases don't die. They just bury themselves until the world shifts enough for them to breathe again. As he sealed the request envelope, a strange sense of anticipation settled over him, an electric pressure, like the pause before a lightning strike. The results came back 3 days later, delivered in a plain white envelope that looked too small to carry 22 years of silence. Hale opened it without ceremony, but as soon as he saw the first line, the breath locked in his chest. The swab contained a partial DNA profile, not enough for a full match, but enough to run through national databases, enough to make something happen that had never happened before. The next page listed the comparison results. Hale read it once, then again, then a third time, slowly, as if the words might change shape if he stared hard enough. A hit, a living relative, direct kinship probability 99.67%. Not Danielle, but someone related to her, someone whose DNA had entered the system within the past year, someone who had either been arrested, processed, or submitted voluntarily for medical or legal purposes, someone who might unknowingly hold the key to everything. The name was Evan Royce. Hale leaned back, the room tilting around him. Evan was Danielle's younger brother, born 3 years after her disappearance. He'd never met her. He'd lived his entire life in the shadow of an absence. The system had caught his DNA because of a minor assault charge the previous year, something related to a bar fight that ended with paperwork and anger, nothing more. But that single scrape with the law placed his genetic signature into a national database, and now it had awakened something buried since 2001. Hale found Evan's current address, a 2-story walk-up on the west side. He didn't bring a team. He didn't call for backup. This wasn't a raid. It was a conversation long overdue. When the door opened, Hale faced a man with the same sharp eyes as Danielle, eyes that held a quiet, unfamiliar grief, as though he carried the weight of someone he had never met but always missed. Evan was wary at first, expecting accusations, but Hale reassured him. This wasn't about his past. It was about hers. They sat at a small kitchen table cluttered with unpaid bills and a half-finished sketchbook. Evan listened as Hale explained the discovery, the evidence pouch, the DNA connection. Confusion swept across his face, then disbelief, then something darker. Fear mixed with hope, two emotions that don't coexist easily. Evan admitted he had always sensed a silent fracture inside his family, the kind that made conversations about the past feel like stepping on glass. His parents rarely spoke of Danielle except in fragments, each sentence clipped short, each memory treated like a wound that would reopen if touched. Evan had grown up in the shadow of a ghost he had never known, and now the ghost was suddenly more real than ever. He gave Hale permission to compare his DNA with Danielle's archived samples. It was a procedural step, but a necessary one. As Evan signed the form, his hands trembled slightly, as though the pen weighed more than it should. Hale left the apartment with the signed consent and a growing certainty that the case had shifted, not just legally, but spiritually. Some cases didn't just solve themselves, they demanded to be solved. The lab confirmed the kinship within 48 hours. What mattered wasn't the match, it was the deeper question the test raised. If the swab came from evidence collected in 2001, why had it been separated from the original case file? Why had it ended up in a storm drain 2 decades later? And what had happened to the rest of the evidence? Hale revisited the archives, digging through boxes labeled Royce, 2001, their edges yellowed with time. Most items were accounted for, but one line in the property report caught his attention. Swab, trace, probable contact, missing. The note had been added years after the initial collection, penciled in lightly, as if added reluctantly. Hale recognized the handwriting instantly. Detective Bram Keller, long retired, once known for his meticulous work and for a temper that could boil at the slightest provocation. Keller had been lead detective on Danielle's case before Hale inherited it, but Keller had left the force early, citing health reasons, and never participated in follow-up interviews. Something about this bothered Hale like a splinter under the skin. If Keller had marked the swab as missing, why had it surfaced now? Why in a drain, miles from the precinct? Evidence didn't migrate on its own. Someone had moved it, either to hide it or to discard it. Hale tracked Keller down to a suburban nursing home, the kind where the walls were too beige and the hallways too quiet. Keller sat near a window, staring at nothing, his mind drifting somewhere far away. Age had softened him, but not enough to erase the shadows in his eyes. When Hale mentioned Danielle's name, the old detective flinched, subtle but unmistakable. Keller's fingers tapped the armrest, a restless rhythm. Hale pressed gently, knowing instincts worked even when memory failed. Finally, Keller whispered, "That case, it should have been solved." The words came out like a confession strangled by regret. Hale asked him about the missing swab, the evidence pouch, the reason it had vanished from the file. Keller hesitated, his gaze flickering to the window as if afraid someone might be listening. Then quietly he said, "I gave it to someone. Someone who said they could get us answers faster." His voice broke. It was a mistake. No name, no description, just the silhouette of a decision that had derailed the case for 22 years. Hale left the nursing home with a new feeling gnawing at him. Not dread, but certainty. The case had been tampered with, not by a criminal, but from within. And whatever Keller had done, whoever he had trusted, had taken that swab and done something that forced it underground until fate, or rainfall, resurrected it. The storm drain had not been a coincidence. It had been a leak, a crack in someone's carefully sealed secret. And for the first time in 22 years, the Chicago 2001 cold case trembled, not from stillness, but from movement. Something buried was pushing its way back to the surface. Something that did not want to stay silent. The next fracture in the silence came from a basement that smelled of dust, old paper, and a decade of forgotten deadlines. City Hall kept its oldest records underground, stacked on metal shelves that bowed under the weight of thousands of files. Permits, inspection reports, property transfers, documents no one cared about until suddenly someone did. Hale had come hoping to find the original chain of custody log for Danielle's case, something Keller might have updated before retiring, a signature or timestamp that could reveal where the missing swab went. But what he found instead was a folder misfiled deep in a section labeled Unassigned Archives, a place clerks used when they were tired, rushed, or careless. The tab read simply, Halstead Dist Holding, 2001. The handwriting wasn't Keller's, it wasn't anyone Hale recognized. That alone sharpened the air. When he opened the folder, the first page wasn't a report. It was a photograph, grainy and discolored, showing the loading dock where Danielle's backpack had been found. But this wasn't the same photo logged in the official case file. In this one, the angle was closer, tighter, focused not on the scene, but on a dark smudge near the edge of the concrete, something that looked like a partial shoe print, something that had never been mentioned in any of the reports. Hale flipped the photo over. On the back was one word written in marker. Noted. No initials, no date, nothing else. His pulse beat faster as he continued flipping through the folder. There were 3 more photos, each showing details from the scene that had never appeared in the official file. A smear on the warehouse door, a dent in the metal railing, a faint line on the pavement like something heavy had been dragged. These weren't random shots. Someone had examined the scene with care, documenting things the original team had either missed or intentionally excluded. And then the last page stopped him cold. A brief, handwritten note attached with a rusted paperclip. Chain compromised. Keep separate until confirmation. Below it, barely legible, B. B, Keller's first initial, but the handwriting, it wasn't his. Someone had signed his name. Someone who wanted the note to look official, just convincing enough to pass through hands that didn't look too closely. Someone who had reason to keep certain evidence separate, not because it was irrelevant, but because it was dangerous. Hale slid the folder into his bag, his jaw tightening, the walls of the archive room pressed inward, the fluorescent lights humming like a warning. Whoever created this folder didn't intend it to be found. It had been buried, not lost. Buried things had owners. Buried things had purpose. When Hale returned to the precinct, he didn't announce his discovery. Some storms require quiet preparation. He locked the office door, spread the photos across his desk, and traced the details with his eyes. The dent in the railing looked like an impact point, maybe from a body being shoved. The smear on the door seemed too deliberate to be accidental, as if someone had braced a hand there. But the most troubling image remained the faint drag line on the concrete, a line that stretched farther than the recorded blood trail, leading not toward the drainage tunnel, but away from it. The official reports might have been incomplete. These photos suggested something worse. They might have been wrong. Hale followed the drag line mentally, plotting its angle, estimating its length. It pointed toward a narrow alley between the warehouse and an adjacent storage building, an alley officers had dismissed in 2001 because it led only to a padlocked maintenance yard. But padlocks could be removed, replaced, or ignored. As the city slept, Hale drove back to Halsted Street. The alley was narrower than he remembered, choked with debris, cardboard boxes, and rusted pipes. The maintenance yard's gate stood shut, the padlock newer than the fence itself. Hale shone his flashlight through the bars and saw weeds, broken crates, and an abandoned lift machine. Nothing suspicious at first glance, but the ground near the gate caught his eye. A shallow depression in the dirt, circular, uniform, like the base of a heavy object that had sat there for a long time. Something had been stored here, something large, something that had weight. Hale stepped back, scanning the yard again. The lift machine was positioned near a wall of stacked pallets, one leaning oddly, as if recently disturbed. He climbed the fence with the slow caution of a man who knew the past depended on tiny movements, not grand ones. When he landed softly on the other side, the earth crunched beneath his boots. He approached the pallets and pulled the first one aside. Behind it, hidden for years, was a rusted metal hatch, the kind used for old underground storage vaults, the kind no one would notice unless they were looking for it. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The dragline, the missing evidence, Keller's cryptic confession, it all aligned like magnets snapping together. Hale knelt and brushed away the dirt, revealing a handle corroded with time. The hatch was heavy, heavier than it should have been, as if it resisted opening out of instinct. When he finally pried it up, stale air exhaled from below, air that smelled of metal, mold, and something else, something that did not belong. He lowered his flashlight into the darkness. The beam swung across cement walls, peeling paint, a narrow ladder descending to a cramped room barely large enough for two people. And there, in the corner, lay what remained of a wooden storage crate, cracked open, its contents long removed. But the floor told a different story. A faint brown stain clung to the concrete, old but unmistakable. Blood. Too old for color, but organic enough to linger like a whisper of violence. And next to it, a tiny scrap of fabric, black, smooth, expensive, identical to the fragment recovered in 2001 from the fence. Something tightened in Hale's chest. He reached for a glove, sealed the fragment in an evidence pouch, and scanned the walls more intently. On one panel near the ladder, someone had scratched a set of initials into the paint, a crude carving, shaky, uneven. D.R. Danielle Royce. The air seemed to collapse around him. It wasn't proof of death. It wasn't proof of anything conclusive, but it was proof that Danielle had been here. Proof that she had been alive inside this hidden vault, perhaps long enough to scratch her initials into the wall. Hale stood perfectly still, his breath hanging in the cold air. The significance was overwhelming, and yet something felt off. The hatch had no locks from the inside. The vault wasn't designed for storage. It was designed for containment. Someone had used this room as a holding cell. He climbed out of the yard trembling but controlled, sealing the hatch again to avoid drawing attention. He needed time. Clerical requests would trigger alerts. Field reports would travel through channels he no longer trusted. Someone had buried evidence once. Someone might do it again. Back in his car, Hale stared at the maintenance yard through the windshield. The alley bathed in dim yellow from a dying street lamp. If Danielle had been taken into that vault, then the abduction had not been random. It had been orchestrated, executed, hidden under infrastructure that no civilian would think to search. He replayed Keller's broken words at the nursing home. I gave it to someone who said they could get us answers faster. This vault didn't belong to the city. It belonged to whoever Keller had trusted, someone with access, someone with authority, someone who could walk through crime scenes without raising suspicion. A police officer, or someone adjacent to law enforcement, the kind of person who knew how to make evidence vanish. Hale checked the time, 1:12 a.m. The city was quieting, but his mind roared. He reopened the misfiled folder, searching the margins for clues. On the back of the third photo, something small caught his eye, an impression in the paper, faint but readable under the beam of his flashlight. Someone had pressed hard enough to leave a pattern on the page beneath whatever they had been writing. He tilted the photo at an angle. The indentation revealed 3 letters. OPS. Operations, a unit designation, a department Keller had never worked in. Someone inside OPS had handled the evidence. Someone inside OPS had kept separate photographs no one else ever saw. Someone inside OPS had access to restricted storage yards and maintenance tunnels. And if OPS had been involved in 2001, then the conspiracy wasn't a single rogue detective. It was structural, embedded, protected by something larger than any one person. Hale swallowed hard, adrenaline buzzing in his fingertips. He stared at the letters, the vault, the dragline, the photos, the storm drain discovery, the chain of custody irregularities, every piece converging like a predator closing in. The Chicago 2001 cold case had never been a puzzle. It had been a cover, and the cover was already cracking. The letters stayed imprinted in Hale's mind long after he left Halsted Street, 3 carved strokes that felt less like a clue and more like a warning. OPS. The operations unit. a department responsible for infrastructure, emergency routing, and logistical oversight, staffed by officers who rarely set foot in crime scenes, but somehow had access to every corner of the city. They were the unseen hands behind barricades, surveillance routes, and emergency protocols, an administrative backbone most residents never heard of and most detectives barely interacted with. But Hale knew enough to understand one thing. OPS didn't create alternate evidence files. OPS didn't collect photographs. OPS didn't hide swabs in separate folders, not unless someone inside the unit was using their administrative reach for something far removed from infrastructure and logistics. He drove through the quiet streets, the city lit by the flickering pulse of street lamps that seemed to dim whenever he passed. The vault beneath the maintenance yard haunted him like a heartbeat beneath the pavement, a reminder that the past wasn't just resurfacing, it was clawing its way into the present. He replayed the images again and again. Danielle's initials carved into paint, the bloodstain, the crate, the drag line, the missing evidence, the swab in the storm drain. Every element connected, but the outline of the picture was still buried, obscured by 22 years of silence. Back inside the precinct, Hale entered the OPS directory, accessing what little information was publicly available. Names, ranks, office assignments, most irrelevant, but one stood out. Lieutenant Raymond Kincaid, OPS liaison to major crime scenes from 1997 to 2004. A man known for his sharp uniform, his meticulous paperwork, and his uncanny ability to appear at scenes before detectives even arrived. His presence had been routine back then, standard protocol during emergencies. But Danielle's disappearance hadn't been classified as an emergency, yet records showed Kincaid listed on the scene attendance log for that night. Hale leaned back, tension pulling at his shoulders. Kincaid's name had never come up in the internal review. No interviews, no statements, no reports written by him. He was listed as on-site, but never documented as having contributed anything. A ghost attending a crime scene, leaving no footprint but his name on a sign-in sheet. He needed more than a name. He needed movement, proof that Kincaid had interacted with the evidence. That meant access logs. OPS wasn't part of the criminal evidence chain, but their trucks, storage lots, and emergency supply stations were tagged with entry records, vehicle logs, dispatch orders. Hale pulled up the archive system, one so outdated it ran from a terminal that hummed like an old refrigerator. He typed slowly, choosing the exact date of Danielle's disappearance. A list of OPS vehicle deployments filled the screen. Most were unrelated. Routine street closures, emergency barriers, traffic reroutes. But one line froze him in place. OPS Unit 14, after hours deployment, Halstead District, 12:41 a.m. 12:41, less than an hour after Danielle's belongings were found. OPS didn't respond to missing persons at midnight. They didn't deploy to alleys. They didn't assist with cordoning off loading docks unless explicitly requested. And there was no record of a request from CPD. Hale opened the details. The vehicle assigned was a standard white OPS van, license number matching one still in use today. The driver listed Lieutenant Raymond Kincaid. He stared at the timestamp until his eyes blurred. Kincaid had not only been at the scene, he had arrived independently, without request, under a vague log entry disguised as routine deployment. And that van... OPS vans were equipped with storage compartments, floodlights, tools, and enough cargo space to transport equipment, crates, or a person. A quiet dread swelled in Hale's chest. He remembered the circular depression in the maintenance yard dirt, the mark of something heavy, something that once sat there long enough to leave an imprint. He cross-referenced OPS Unit 14's vehicle logs for the entire week. Something else surfaced, subtle but damning. The van had entered the maintenance yard adjacent to the warehouse at 1:17 a.m. on the night of Danielle's disappearance. It stayed parked for 26 minutes, and no departure time was recorded. Log error? Possibly. But the entry gate timestamp told a different story. The van left the yard at 1:43 a.m. The two records didn't match. Someone had manually altered one of the logs, and not well. Hale felt the room tilt. His heartbeat quickened. A van, a hidden vault, a missing swab, a folder buried in City Hall, and Kincaid's name threading through all of it like a spine. He couldn't prove guilt, not yet, but he could feel the shape of it forming. He printed the logs, slid them into a folder, and locked them in his desk drawer. This wasn't something to take to internal affairs, not until he understood who else was involved. Because if Kincaid had manipulated evidence once, he might have had help. OPS operated like a hive. No one moved without someone noticing, and the person who tampered with the case might still be watching. At dawn, Hale returned to the maintenance yard, not through the alley this time, but through the official gate off the main street. He flashed his badge at the security guard, an older man who squinted as though every visitor was a blurred memory. Hale asked for access logs, and the guard shrugged, saying half the records from early 2000s had been lost in a system migration. But Hale wasn't after digital logs. He pointed to an old record book sitting beneath the counter. Dusty, forgotten, handwritten. The guard sighed. Ain't no one looked at that thing in years. Hale flipped through the pages carefully, each line a quiet relic. Then, midway through 2001, he found the page for September, and there, scrawled in faded ink, OPS 14, access granted, R. Kincaid, 1:17 a.m. Below it, another line, written later in different handwriting. OPS 14, exit, time unclear, see shift log. The discrepancy was confirmed. Someone had updated exit logs retroactively, and the person who wrote the unclear note had purposely avoided committing to a time. Hale stared at the book, letting the weight of the date settle over him like dust. The old security guard shuffled closer, peering at the name. Kincaid, the guard muttered. Haven't heard that name in a while. Hard man. Didn't like being questioned. Hale turned. You remember him? The guard nodded slowly, rubbing his jaw. Worked nights sometimes, always serious, always in a hurry. Back then, he came through here often. Too often. Said Opes was storing equipment, but I never saw them pick anything up after. Hale's pulse ticked upward. Did he ever access the vault? The guard frowned. Vault? This yard doesn't have... Hale waited. The guard's face shifted. Realization crept in like a shadow. Oh, you mean the old one? That thing's been sealed for 20 years, maybe more. Kincaid was the last one I saw near it. I remember because he asked for a crowbar and a flashlight, told me it was for inspection. What year? The guard blinked hard. Hell, I don't know, early 2000s, after that college girl went missing, I think, but don't quote me. Hale stepped back, breath controlled but shallow. Everything aligned too perfectly. Kincaid accessing the yard. Kincaid near the vault. Kincaid with tools. Kincaid unaccounted for. And Keller's confession that he gave evidence to someone who said they could get answers faster. A man like Kincaid could have promised that, and then buried the truth. But Hale needed one more confirmation, not speculation, proof. He returned to the vault at nightfall, this time with better gear and steadier resolve. The hatch creaked like a reluctant witness. He descended carefully, flashlight sweeping the walls. The initials glowed faintly in the beam. The old crate fragments, the dried stain, the scrap of fabric. But now he noticed something else, something he had missed before. A series of shallow scratches on the floor near the crate's remains, parallel lines, even spacing, as if something had been dragged repeatedly in the same arc. Not a crate, not a body, a chair. A chair bolted into the concrete at some point in the past, then removed abruptly. His stomach twisted. This wasn't just containment, it was interrogation, or worse. Then, as he scanned higher, he saw it. A faint symbol on the wall above the ladder, drawn in charcoal or soot, a circle with a line through it, not graffiti, not random. A mark, a message, a sign that someone had been here with intention. He photographed everything, every scratch, every shadow, every symbol. Then he climbed out, sealing the hatch, heart pounding with grim clarity. Kincaid wasn't just a loose thread, he was the knot. And unraveling him might pull something far larger and far darker out of hiding. The symbol on the wall stayed etched in Hale's vision long after he left the maintenance yard, hovering like a dark watermark behind every thought. A circle with a single line cutting through it, primitive, deliberate, not the work of vandals. He had seen symbols like that only in the margins of old case files, the kind involving groups that communicated through marks instead of words, codes carved on door frames or whispered in stairwells. But this was different, cruder, older, an emblem of someone who didn't want recognition, only remembrance. Hale replayed the details in his mind as he sat in his car, the vault, the blood, the crate, the drag marks, the chair bolts, the initials on the wall, and above everything the shape of the symbol watching silently. He drove back to the precinct in a silence that felt heavy enough to bend steel. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, as if resisting the darkness he carried inside. Hale opened the OPS personnel archive again, but the system responded slower this time, as though reluctant to give him what he sought. He reviewed Kincaid's service record, commendations, transfers, operations logs, all immaculate. Too immaculate. No disciplinary actions, no complaints, no irregularities. A career polished to a shine that felt unnatural in a department where even the best officers accumulated scars. But one detail cracked the veneer. Kincaid had supervised emergency infrastructure inspections across several industrial districts, including the one containing the vault, 3 times between 2000 and 2002. Inspections never documented in city planning reports. Records showed that Kincaid signed the forms alone. No assistants, no witnesses. Inspections conducted after midnight, when the city was quiet and oversight was minimal. Hale leaned back, the air in his office thinning. Midnight inspections, unauthorized access to yards, interference with evidence. And Keller, poor, broken Keller, had handed him something. Hale imagined the moment. Keller desperate, overwhelmed, someone stepping in with a voice promising efficiency, support, answers. Someone offering what Keller needed most. Certainty in the middle of chaos. And then burying the truth under layers of procedure. But Hale needed more than suspicion. He needed weight, proof, and that meant tracking the symbol. He ran it through digital archives, searching graffiti databases, gang symbols, occult groups, construction markings, old operational shorthand. Nothing matched exactly, but one fragment came close. An outdated OPS field mark used internally in the 1980s and early 90s to indicate restricted access, areas under renovation, electrical hazard zones, or spaces temporarily sealed off pending inspection. A circle with a vertical line meant "do not enter," hazard identified. But the one Hale saw had a diagonal line, not vertical, altered, reclaimed, distorted into something else, something that seemed to say this place is marked, this place belongs to someone. The thought chilled him. He needed eyes on Kincaid, not the man he was now, but the man he had been then. Hale searched through old photos from city events, parades, OPS gatherings, award ceremonies. Kincaid always stood at the edge of each frame, stiff, controlled, watching the camera rather than the celebration. His gaze was sharp, cold, predatory, not in aggression, but in vigilance. He looked like a man who measured people, calculated them, logged them internally for later use. Hale printed the photos, pinned them above his desk, studying the way Kincaid carried himself, the tilt of his head, the tension in his jaw, the slight forward lean of someone accustomed to stepping into others' conversations without permission. He wasn't a man who merely enforced rules. He was a man who created them in the shadows. There was one more thing, a name appearing in a footnote of a 2001 internal OPS memo. Oversight provided by Lieutenant Kincaid, assisted by Officer P. Van. Van. Hale had never seen the name before. A quick search revealed that Officer Paul Van had resigned from OPS suddenly in 2003, no reason listed, after only 6 years in service. He had no forwarding address, no subsequent employment records, no online presence, nothing except a single annotation in a personnel review noting excellent compliance but limited leadership potential. An invisible man working beside another. Hale stared at the name, feeling the slow, agonizing tightening in his chest that signaled a truth forming. If Kincaid had needed help in 2001, moving evidence, altering logs, accessing storage areas, it wouldn't have been a senior officer. It would have been someone young, pliable, obedient, someone like Van, and now Van had vanished. At dusk, Hale pulled up Kincaid's last known address, an apartment in a quiet neighborhood that looked more like a retirement waiting room than a home for an OPS lieutenant with influence. The building manager opened the records reluctantly, revealing Kincaid had moved out 2 months earlier. No forwarding address, rent paid in full, cash. The apartment had been left spotless. Too spotless. Hale requested access. The manager shrugged and handed him the key, muttering that the tenant had been strange, always leaving at odd hours, barely speaking to neighbors. The door opened with a hollow click, revealing an interior empty to the bone. No furniture, no dust, no signs of life, only the faint imprint of a couch leg in the carpet and a pale rectangle on the wall where a framed picture had once hung. Hale walked slowly across the room, his senses heightened. He wasn't searching for objects, he was searching for residue, the aftertaste of someone's presence. But the space felt stripped of personality, sanitized to the point of erasure. He checked the closets, the kitchen drawers, the bathroom cabinet, all barren. Except for one thing. Inside the bedroom closet, taped to the underside of the upper shelf, hidden where only someone searching blind would discover it, was a small metal tag, rusted, dented, no bigger than a dog tag. Hale peeled it off carefully. The engraving was faint, worn by time, but still visible. OPS restricted 14. Unit 14, the same van from the logs, the same number linked to the yard, the same unit that entered the scene the night Danielle disappeared. The metal felt warm in his palm, as if it had been waiting for him. He pocketed it and scanned the room again. The walls were plain except for one subtle detail. On the baseboard near the window, someone had scratched a single line into the paint. One line. Not two, not three, just one. A tally mark. A reminder, a count, a message. His breath grew shallow. If the vault beneath the yard had held one person, perhaps this mark represented that. But it could mean something else, something Hale didn't want to imagine yet. Outside, the sky dimmed into a purple bruise. Hale locked the apartment behind him and headed to the car, but as he reached for his keys, something in his peripheral vision froze him. Across the street, parked in the shadow of a delivery truck, was a white OPS van. The same model as Unit 14. Unmarked, idle, dark. Hale's heart slammed into his ribs. He approached cautiously, hand near his holster, eyes scanning for movement. No engine noise, no footprints near the tires, no driver silhouette. He peered inside. Empty. But on the passenger seat lay something chilling, a new evidence pouch, clean, untorn, empty, and printed on the label in crisp black ink. CPD property, do not discard. The same words as the pouch from the storm drain. Hale's fingers tightened. Someone was sending a message. He checked the dashboard. No GPS device, no registration in the compartment. The ignition wires hung loosely, stripped and manipulated. The van wasn't city property, it was a replica. Someone had built their own OPS vehicle. Someone who wanted Hale to see it. Someone who was watching him. He scanned the street, senses sharpening, but saw nothing except the distant glow of a traffic light turning red. He stepped back, the weight of the empty evidence pouch sinking into him like a stone. Whoever left it knew he was coming, knew he was searching, knew he was close enough to require interference. He called in a field unit to impound the vehicle, issuing a quiet order to handle it discreetly. No paperwork outside his control, no chatter, no assumptions. As the patrol car arrived, Hale stood still, watching the van being loaded, the empty pouch sealed inside. The officers didn't ask questions. They knew better. Some discoveries were not meant for open discussion. Hale drove back through the city with the grim certainty that the cold case was no longer just a past mystery, it was activating in the present. Someone who had remained dormant for 22 years was awake now, a person or network capable of moving through departments, forging logs, hiding evidence, infiltrating spaces unnoticed. OPS wasn't just a unit, it was a veil, and Kincaid wasn't just a suspect, he was a key. But keys unlock more than doors. They open histories. They open secrets. They open scars. Hale returned home long after midnight, exhaustion crawling across his bones. But sleep had no place in his world now. Not with the van, not with the tag, not with the mark in the closet. He pinned the metal plate to the board above his desk, aligning it next to the altered photos, the scratch marks from the vault, the symbol on the wall. Patterns formed, lines converged, and the outline of a hidden truth began to sharpen, like a silhouette emerging from fog. The Chicago 2001 cold case was no longer a cold case. It was a living thing, breathing, watching, waiting, and Hale knew with chilling clarity that the next move would not be his, it would be theirs. The hours before dawn tasted metallic, thick with a tension that clung to Hale's skin like cold sweat. His apartment had become a war room of silent evidence, photos pinned to the walls, logs printed and spread across the table, the metal OPS tag reflecting the glint of his desk lamp like an unblinking eye. The empty evidence pouch sat beside it, a mute threat. He stared at the symbols and lines he'd drawn between the pieces, watching the story form not in words but in gravity, certain objects pulling others closer, building a center of weight so dark it threatened to collapse everything around it. He needed to find Van. That name had burrowed into him like a splinter. If Kincaid was the architect of whatever had happened in 2001, Van was the witness, the pair of hands that obeyed commands, the shadow who carried out the unspoken tasks. Hale ran every database, tracking every Paul Van within 100 miles. Half had moved out of state, one was deceased, one was working construction in Joliet. None matched the age or background of the OPS officer from 2001. It was as if Officer Paul Van had been carved out of the city and thrown to the wind. But no one disappears without leaving an indentation somewhere, a forgotten bill, a leftover record, an unclosed file. Hale expanded the search into physical archives, diving into the stacks at city records like a man descending into a cavern. Paper smelled like mildew and old ink, shelves clattered when he pulled too hard. Dust curled in the air like faint ghosts. Then, tucked between two personnel folders from unrelated departments, he found it, a transfer request. P. Van, temporary assignment, OPS liaison, reclassification pending. Dated October 2002, approved but never finalized, the signature at the bottom ignited his pulse. Lieutenant Raymond Kincaid. The transfer had been initiated but not completed. Why? Because Van left suddenly? Or because someone didn't want the transfer on record? Hale stared at the file, turning it over mentally. If Van had tried to leave OPS or change his role, that might have placed him in danger. The kind of danger that results in missing records, erased histories, and abandoned identities. He photocopied the document, folded it into his jacket, and headed out. As he stepped onto the street, he felt it immediately, the sensation of being observed, the kind of watchfulness that didn't come from pedestrians or passing cars, the kind that pressed against the spine with invisible fingers. Hale kept walking, hands steady, eyes scanning reflections in the glass windows he passed. A figure moved in the distortion. Too quick, out of place, gone when he pivoted. He reached his car and slid inside, exhaling slowly. He wasn't imagining it. Someone had followed him from the moment he left the precinct. Someone familiar with surveillance. Someone who understood distance and angles. He turned the key, engine rumbling awake, and merged into traffic, weaving a pattern designed to reveal tails. He took unnecessary turns, circled blocks, paused at long yellow lights, doubled back through alleys. Nothing. Either he was truly alone, or the watcher knew how to disappear better than he could reveal. By afternoon, Hale parked near a row of old government storage buildings, structures that once housed equipment but now sat half empty, repurposed for archives that no one bothered to maintain. His gut told him that the answer to Van's disappearance wasn't in digital logs, but in this forgotten maze of steel and dust. He entered the first warehouse, cold air brushing past him. Shelves towered on both sides, filled with boxes labeled in fading ink. He moved methodically, checking OPS-related sections, scanning for anything related to personnel. It was in the fourth aisle, tucked behind a failed equipment request form, where he found it. A binder marked UPS Internal, 2002. Inside, pages had been ripped out, leaving jagged remnants along the spine. But a few entries remained, and one caught his eye. P. Van reassigned, temporary detail, status confidential. Confidential. OPS didn't use that designation for personnel reassignment, not unless the officer had been moved into a sensitive investigation or under disciplinary scrutiny, but the notes offered no details, only a reference code. See UPS R17. Halo searched the shelves for R17, following the narrow aisle, his footsteps echoing faintly. The building hummed with age. He reached the back corner where one box remained on a sagging shelf, its label half torn. He pulled it down, dust billowing out in a choking cloud. Inside were old keys, broken padlocks, decommissioned ID cards, but at the bottom, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, lay a badge, an OPS badge. Number 2271. Nameplate missing. Hale's breath hitched. He held the badge at eye level, noticing how the number had been scratched, deliberately, aggressively, as if someone wanted to obscure it but couldn't bring themselves to destroy it. He turned it over. A faint smear on the back, rust, or something darker, something organic. He bagged the badge and continued searching the box. Another item caught his attention. A wallet, cracked at the edges. Inside were no cards, no ID, only a single scrap of paper tucked behind the lining. Hale unfolded it carefully. The writing was hurried, crooked, almost panicked. He knows. Don't trust the logs, don't trust the unit. Check the yard, check beneath. No signature, but Hale knew whose handwriting trembled on the page. Van. A warning written before he vanished. Hale's heartbeat thudded in his ears. Van had discovered something. Something that scared him enough to leave a message hidden in a box no one was supposed to open. The words check beneath stabbed at Hale's memory. The vault, the symbol, the drag marks, Danielle's initials. Everything pointed back to that underground chamber. He had to return. But he wasn't the only one heading there. Hale pulled into the maintenance yard under the cover of dusk. The security guard from days earlier wasn't at the booth. Unusual, but not alarming. He walked toward the fence, scanning for movement. The yard was quiet. Too quiet. He climbed the fence quickly, dropping into the dirt on the other side, making his way toward the hatch. Then he froze. The hatch was open. Not pride, not damage. Open! A dark rectangle yawned at him from the ground. Hale drew his flashlight and gun simultaneously, approaching with controlled steps. The air drifting out of the vault felt colder than before, tinged with the metallic scent of something recently disturbed. He lowered himself into the chamber, body tense, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. What he saw wasn't what he expected. The initials on the wall were still there, the scratch marks, the stains, the remnants of the crate, but now, scattered across the floor, were fragments of new debris, fresh footprints in the dust, pacing back and forth. Someone had been here recently, very recently. And in the center of the vault lay an object wrapped in a torn plastic sheet. Hale stepped closer, weapon steady. He nudged the plastic aside with the barrel of his gun. A file, a police file, water-stained, edges shredded but unmistakably labeled. Royce, 2001, supplemental. His heart lurched. Supplemental? There was no supplemental file in the original case logs. This file wasn't in the precinct archives. It wasn't in City Hall. It wasn't in the evidence chain. Someone had hidden it here. Hale crouched, flipping it open. Pages clung together with grime. The first sheet was a report he had never seen. The second was a photocopy of a statement taken from a witness whose name had been redacted, someone who claimed they heard shouting inside the warehouse the night Danielle disappeared. But the third page stopped his breath. A photograph of a man, standing in the alley near the loading dock, face turned away, wearing a black jacket, hands gloved, standing next to the torn backpack, and scribbled beneath the photo in faded ink. Observed by P. Van, C note. There was no note. The page had been ripped out. Hale's shock dissolved into dread. Van hadn't disappeared randomly. He had gotten too close. He had documented something, or someone, that wasn't supposed to be seen. Hale scanned the vault once more, the air tightening around him. Something glimmered near the base of the wall. He knelt, brushing dirt aside. A boot print. Deep, fresh. Bigger than his. Someone had followed him here. Someone had stood exactly where he was kneeling. Someone was watching the investigation unfold from the shadows. Hale heard a faint noise above, a soft creak like weight shifting on metal. He looked up. The hatch above him began to close. Slowly, silently, deliberately. Someone was sealing him inside. The hatch slid shut with a sound too soft to be accidental, the kind of sound made by someone who knew exactly how to move metal without drawing attention. Hale lunged upward on instinct, catching the last sliver of light with his fingertips, but the lid slammed into place, plunging the vault into suffocating darkness. Dust fell from the ceiling like the room was exhaling. For a moment, everything went dead silent. No footsteps above, no shifting weight, no taunting voice. Whoever sealed him inside didn't linger. They didn't need to. Their message had already been delivered. Hale's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, slicing across the concrete walls like a blade. His breath steamed in the cold air, hanging in front of him like smoke. This was no accident, no prank, no coincidence. Someone had known the exact moment he would return. Someone had been waiting. He steadied his pulse, forcing his thoughts to sharpen rather than spiral. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. The vault was small, 8 feet by 6, just enough space to crouch, not enough to pace. He tested the hatch with his shoulder. Solid, reinforced from the outside. He tried again, harder. It didn't budge. He lowered his flashlight, scanning the edges of the walls. Old storage vaults like this sometimes had maintenance vents, escape shafts, hidden panels, things long sealed but not erased. He ran his fingers along the concrete, feeling for cracks or changes in texture. Nothing. Smooth, cold, merciless. Then he spotted something near the floor, a thin, vertical line carved into the wall, almost invisible beneath decades of grime. He crouched, tracing it with the tip of his glove. The marking wasn't new. It had been made before. Same angle, same depth. Another tally mark. He felt a freeze crawl across his ribs. The one in Kincaid's apartment could have been a reminder, a count of something, someone. But this one, hidden inside the vault, felt different, a record. A record made by someone trapped. Someone who wanted the world to know they had been here. He shone the light more widely, sweeping across the lower portion of the wall. Another mark, and another, and another. 5, 7, maybe more, some faint, some deep, carved with desperation instead of tools. Scratches made by fingernails or something sharp, each one a quiet scream etched into stone. Danielle's initials weren't the only sign she left. Someone else had been here, maybe before her, maybe after, maybe both. He stood slowly, forcing his breath to steady. The air in the vault felt tighter now, as though the room itself was closing in. He scanned the ceiling, searching for anything. Hinges, weaknesses, rusted sections. Near the back corner, barely visible, was an old ventilation shaft sealed with bolts so rusted they looked fused to the frame. But the seal wasn't perfect. There was a faint draft, thin, cold air slipping through, carrying a distant metallic scent. He aimed his flashlight upward, and that was when he saw it. Inside the vent, caught on the inner grate, was a strip of fabric. Black, smooth, expensive. The same kind, the same material, the same fabric that had shown up twice before, on the fence back in 2001 and inside the vault days earlier. A thread running through time, a signature of presence. Hale reached up, fingers brushing the grate. It wouldn't open without tools, and he had none. He forced himself to think. The hatch could only be sealed from the outside. He could only escape if he broke that seal or signaled someone he trusted. But no one knew he was here. The person who closed the hatch made sure of that. He checked his phone. No signal. He checked his radio. Dead. Interference. Either the vault's construction blocked communication, or someone had placed a jammer nearby. He lifted the file again, flipping through the pages for clues. The missing note from Van gnawed at him. What had he written? What connection had he discovered that was important enough to hide in a vault? Hale examined the torn edge. It had been ripped recently, cleanly. Someone had taken the note before he arrived. Someone knew the value of Van's words. The photograph of the man near the backpack pulled him in. The angle was poor, but the posture, the rigid stance, the squared shoulders felt familiar. He enlarged the photo with his phone flashlight, watching the grainy pixels distort. The face was turned away, but the jacket, black, well-fitted, high quality. OPS officers wore standard-issue jackets, but this one wasn't standard. It looked like something bought privately, something worn by someone who didn't want to be recognized as law enforcement. Then he saw the footwear. Boots. Heavy. Utility grade. Same tread pattern as the fresh print on the vault floor. The man in the old photo and the person who sealed Hale inside the vault shared the same type of boot. Not proof of identity, but proof of connection. A chill crawled up his spine. Kincaid, Van, the vault, the logs, the symbol. Everything surged like an undertow, pulling him deeper into something vast. But one question echoed. Where had Kincaid gone? Hale sank to the floor, mind racing through possibilities. Kincaid wasn't dead. No one this meticulous vanished without intention. If he had abandoned his apartment, scrubbed it clean, left only a small metal tag and a tally mark, it wasn't carelessness, it was choreography. A controlled departure, a step taken before someone else forced him to take it. The vault felt colder now, the darkness pressing from all sides. Hale forced himself to stand again, testing the hatch with renewed strength, but it didn't shift. He pressed his ear against it. Nothing. Whoever sealed him inside had already walked away. Maybe yards away, maybe miles. He stepped back, breathing through the silence, cataloging every sound. A faint echo. Not from above, from the vent. Something moving. Not air. Not wind. Something scraping metal lightly, as if adjusting position. Hale raised his flashlight. "Who's there?" The words echoed back at him, swallowed by the tight walls. Silence. Then, after several heartbeats, so quiet he almost dismissed it, a whisper. Not words. Just breath. A presence. Someone was inside the ventilation network. Watching. Listening. He steadied his stance, shoulders squared, every instinct alert. If you can hear me, answer. Nothing at first. Then, the faintest tremor of movement again, like a retreat. He felt the dread pulse through him. Whoever was in the vents wasn't here to help him. They were here because they knew someone else had entered the vault, the same person who had sealed him inside, the same person who had taken Van's note, the same presence that left the empty evidence pouch. Hale lifted his flashlight toward the hatch, shining the beam along its underside. The edges gleamed slightly, like fresh metal. Someone had recently reinforced it. This vault hadn't been abandoned over decades. It had been maintained, used, prepared. He took a step toward the wall where the tally marks lived, his fingers tracing them like braille. He whispered not to the room, but to the ghosts inside it. "You weren't left here by accident." His voice bounced back sharper than he expected, hitting him with its own truth. Then he noticed something he hadn't before, near the corner, beneath the grime, a small indentation in the floor, not a scratch, not a stain, a hole, circular, half an inch deep, precisely drilled, not for a bolt or a chair leg, for a camera mount. This vault had once held surveillance equipment. Hale's pulse quickened as he followed the direction the mount would have faced, toward the wall with the initials, the tally marks, the place where someone wanted to watch fear accumulate one mark at a time. The room wasn't a storage vault. It was an observation chamber, a controlled environment, a place used to study terror. Behind him, a soft creak echoed through the vent again, not movement this time. Something settling, heavy metal, slow, as if a panel somewhere was being closed. Bracing, preparing, the realization crawled through him like ice. The person who sealed him in wasn't just hiding something. They were protecting something. Protecting this vault. Protecting whoever or whatever used it. He stepped back beneath the hatch, inhaled slowly, summoned every ounce of strength in his arms, and hurled his shoulder upward again. The hatch rattled, barely, but for the first time it moved a fraction of an inch. Someone hadn't latched it fully. That was his only chance. He stepped back, centered his weight, and slammed upward again. Metal groaned. Light fractured through the edge. He pushed harder, every muscle burning, every breath ripping through his chest. The hatch burst open, slamming back against the dirt, night air crashing into the vault like a tidal wave. Hale hauled himself upward, rolling onto the ground, lungs heaving. But as he stood, flashlight trembling in his grip, he saw it, a footprint beside the hatch. Fresh, facing away. Whoever sealed him in had stood there long enough to leave a mark. And they had walked calmly toward the fence, leaving behind only one thing. A symbol drawn in the dirt, a circle, with a line through it. The symbol in the dirt felt like a silent accusation, drawn with a confidence that spoke more than any threat scrawled on paper. Hale crouched and traced its outline with the beam of his flashlight, watching the circle dissolve slightly under the breeze sweeping through the yard. Whoever left it had done so deliberately, close enough for him to see immediately, far enough from the hatch to imply that sealing him inside was only the first message. The second was this mark, a signature, a claim, a reminder that the person he was hunting wasn't running. They were circling. He stood slowly, scanning the chain-link fence for movement, shadows, silhouettes, anything. But the yard was empty, abandoned except for the echo of his own ragged breathing. The security booth still sat dark, the chair inside turned slightly as if someone had risen from it moments before. The absence of the guard carved a hollow space inside him. Too many disappearances, too many vanishing points. He moved quickly toward the booth, pushing open the door. The air inside was faintly warm, recently occupied. A half-finished coffee sat on the desk, still steaming, but the radio had been ripped out from the console, wires dangling like exposed veins. Whoever had been here either fled or was taken. Either way, they weren't coming back. Hale exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the desk, forcing his heartbeat to steady before it ran away from him. If Kincaid, or whoever operated behind Kincaid, had a foothold inside OPS 2 decades ago, they could still have access now. They could move unseen through maintenance yards, storage facilities, subterranean passages, the forgotten infrastructure veins of the city. The vault wasn't just a hidden room, it was a node in a much larger network, and he needed to find the next one. He left the yard and drove through the city as dawn bled across the skyline, turning concrete silver and the lake into a sheet of dark mirror. His mind replayed every detail, stitching it into something coherent. Van's warning, the missing supplemental file, the photograph, the tally marks, the repeated symbol, the presence in the vents, the empty OPS van, the apartment scrubbed clean. He could feel a structure forming, a pattern too calculated to be impulsive, too layered to be the work of a single man. He pulled into the precinct parking lot just as the first officers of the morning shift arrived, their chatter low and oblivious to the turbulence swirling around him. Hale walked inside without greeting anyone, heading straight to his office. Once the door was shut, he locked it and set his flashlight, the Royce supplemental file, the OPS tag, and the scrap of fabric from the vent onto the desk in a deliberate line, as if arranging artifacts from a ritual. He opened the Royce supplemental file again, staring at the missing page. The edges were torn clean, not shredded. Someone had removed it quickly, but with precision. He flipped to the back where the witness statement summary ended abruptly. A name was blacked out, a location redacted, but a date remained. October 3rd, 2001. The witness had reported hearing shouting from inside the warehouse around midnight. The note that should have accompanied the photo was gone. But the observation attributed to Van, see note, remained like a ghost of information. Hale's mind snagged on the date, October 3rd, 2 days after the official search had ended, 2 days after OPS had last recorded Kincaid's midnight inspection. Someone had been in that warehouse at least twice, once the night Danielle vanished, and again after the police closed the perimeter. He reached for the property logbook he'd taken from City Hall's basement earlier and scanned the OPS activity records around that date. 2 entries in particular stood out. OPS Unit 14, Halstead Infrastructure Check 10-2, 11:45 p.m. OPS Unit 17, Warehouse Hazard Assessment 10-3, 12:09 a.m. Hale felt his jaw tighten. Hazard assessment? For what? No report existed in the infrastructure database. No photographs, no notes, no follow-up. OPS Unit 17 wasn't on the roster anymore. The officer assigned that night was listed as TBD, a placeholder used when the system couldn't retrieve the data, which meant someone had removed it manually. 2 units, 2 nights, 2 unrecorded inspections, both near the warehouse, both under Kincaid's authority. Hale leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The city wasn't just hiding the truth. Someone had tunneled under it, carving routes through bureaucracy like a miner digging tunnels in the dark, and Hale was following their path blindly. He needed a different angle. Records wouldn't give him what he needed. People would. He pulled out his phone and dialed Evan Royce. The call went to voicemail. He tried again. Still nothing. A knot twisted in his chest. He checked the database to see if Evan's last ping placed him near home. It hadn't. According to the system, his GPS last recorded him near a service road by the old industrial district, close to the yard. Too close. Hale grabbed his coat and bolted for the door. By the time he reached the industrial district, the sun had lifted just enough to cast long, razor-sharp shadows across the abandoned warehouses. He drove slowly, eyes scanning every corner, every blind turn. The service road was cracked and overgrown in places, weeds curling through the pavement. Halfway down, he spotted something lying near the edge of the curb. A cell phone. Evans. Face down, screen shattered, battery still warm. Hale's throat constricted. He crouched, examining the ground. Skid marks. Fresh. The thin imprint of a vehicle that braked too quickly. A set of footprints. 2 sets. One belonging to lighter shoes, the other large, heavy boots. The boots dragged slightly, like someone hauling a resisting body. Hale followed the prints. They led toward a derelict warehouse with boarded-up windows and a rusted sign that read Parker Ironworks. The main doors were chained shut from the outside, but a smaller side entrance was open, just barely, its lock broken cleanly, not forced. He entered quietly, gun drawn, heartbeat drumming behind his ribs. The warehouse smelled of old iron, rain rot, and something else, something new, an acrid chemical scent. Inside, sunlight filtered through holes in the roof, illuminating piles of scrap metal and stacks of forgotten machinery. His eyes adjusted quickly, tracking motion, shadows. He moved toward the center of the floor, where a long table stood beneath a hanging light. On the table were photographs. Dozens of them. All of Danielle. Her high school portraits. Her college ID photo. Surveillance stills from the street near the loading dock. Images from crime scene evidence logs. Some he recognized. Some he had never seen. And pinned at the center of the table was a single page torn from a notebook. His breath caught. It was Van's handwriting. He read the lines slowly, feeling the words slice through him. He wasn't working alone. Below that, in smaller letters, OPS R17 is more than one person. Hale felt a tremor roll through him. His mind raced. R17 wasn't a reference code. It was a designation, a cell, a network. Before he could process further, he heard a faint sound echo through the warehouse. Something dragging across the floor. Hale spun, gun raised, but saw nothing except dust unsettled in a thin, shimmering line across the concrete. Then another sound, a low metallic thud, coming from the back. He moved slowly, stepping between towering stacks of rusted machinery. Light disappeared, shadows thickened. The smell intensified, metal, dampness, faint decay. He reached a narrow corridor leading toward what once had been a fabrication room. The door was half open. He nudged it with the barrel of his gun, and what he saw inside froze him from the inside out. A chair bolted to the floor, chains dangling. Fresh, clean, not rusted. Beside it, a smear on the floor, a smear the color of dark, drying blood. Hale moved closer, breath shallow. Something lay in the corner. A jacket. Black. Smooth. Expensive. He reached down, lifting it, and the world lurched. Footsteps behind him. Slow. Measured. Unhurried. He turned sharply, but whoever had been there slipped back into the dark, footsteps fading like fading heartbeat echoes. On the floor beneath the jacket was a second piece of paper. Another note. Van's handwriting again. Shakier. Barely legible. If you read this, don't go deeper. They already know you're here. Hale lifted the note with trembling fingers. And on the back of it, the symbol, a circle, with a diagonal line drawn in thick black ink. Not old, not faded, fresh. The symbol stared up at Hale like an eye carved out of darkness, the diagonal slash cutting through the circle with a precision that felt ritualistic. Fresh ink, fresh warning, fresh ownership. He held the note at arm's length, not because he feared it physically, but because of what it meant. Someone was watching him from so close a distance that the ink on their threat hadn't even dried. Someone had stood in this room minutes before he entered, maybe even seconds. The warehouse swallowed sound in a way that made Hale feel as though the walls themselves were listening, waiting for him to make a wrong move. He folded the note carefully, slid it into the inner pocket of his jacket, and stepped backward toward the open door. His flashlight beam twitched across the floor, catching the faint streaks near the bolted chair. Not old stains, not historical relics, fresh, deliberate. Someone had used this space recently, and someone wanted him to know it. He exhaled slowly, a thin cloud drifting through the cold air, and listened. Not for footsteps, those would be too easy. For silence, the kind of silence that changes shape when someone is inside it. He edged into the main warehouse space again, letting the light sweep across the towering steel beams and rusted machinery. The photographs of Danielle on the table flickered in the draft, curling slightly at the corners like they wanted to recoil from whatever presence lingered here. Hale approached them carefully, sifting through each one. Some were official crime scene images. Others were personal photos, pictures no police file ever contained. Someone had followed Danielle long before she vanished. Someone had watched her, studied her, tracked her movements like observing prey. Then he noticed something else, not photographs, sketches, rough, hurried drawings on thin paper at the edge of the table. Faces, figures, scenes, a hallway, a basement, the vault. The chair bolted to the floor, the symbol on the wall, and at the center of one sketch, the outline of a man, features blurred but posture unmistakable. Tall, rigid, wearing a jacket with a patch on the sleeve. OPS. Hale felt a slow electric pulse ricochet through him. These weren't just sketches, they were attempts to identify someone, attempts made by someone who knew they didn't have long. Someone who had been held here, someone who used their final minutes of freedom to draw the truth. Van. His name echoed coldly in the air. Hale snapped a photo of every sketch, every image on the table, every irregular trace the unknown hands had left behind. The warehouse groaned under a passing gust, metal complaining in long, hollow sighs. He turned his head sharply, shadows shifted, not from wind, from movement. He aimed his light toward the far end of the warehouse, where stacks of scrap metal rose like jagged cliffs. A flicker. A shape. Shoulder, elbow, the ghost of a silhouette. Someone watching him. Hale didn't call out. A watcher who reveals themselves intentionally is either baiting you or warning you, a distinction that only becomes clear when it's too late. He stepped backward slowly, boots whispering against the dust, keeping the light directed at the silhouette without aiming directly at it. The shape didn't advance, didn't withdraw, just stood still, a patient shadow in a city of shadows. He retreated toward the side entrance, pulse thudding like a ticking clock. When he reached the threshold, he turned his light back toward the silhouette. Gone. Vanished. The dust where the figure had stood was undisturbed, as if the person had never stood there at all. Hale stepped outside, lungs pulling in air that tasted sharp and metallic, tinged with danger and the unmistakable threat of pursuit. He looked toward the edge of the service road, searching for Evan, hoping for some sign, some movement, but the area was empty except for the shattered phone and the drag marks fading into the dirt. He stood perfectly still, letting the quiet settle into him. Then he lifted his own phone. No signal. He walked several more feet. Still nothing. A dead zone. A manufactured dead zone. Someone had set up interference, just like near the vault. This wasn't a random industrial graveyard. It was a perimeter, invisible but real. Hale returned to his car, keeping his shoulders low, senses sharp. He unlocked the door, slid inside, and started the engine. The dashboard lit up, but the radio sputtered, drowned in a static too dense to be accidental. He pulled away from the warehouse slowly, scanning the rearview mirror. For several blocks, nothing followed him, but he knew better than to believe he was alone. He didn't go back to the precinct. He didn't go home. He drove instead to a location barely anyone knew, a shuttered CPD training annex slated for demolition. The building sat abandoned, its windows boarded, its interior stripped of everything except bare floors and empty rooms. He parked behind the collapsed loading bay and slipped inside through a gap in the plywood. Only here, inside an unlisted ruin, did he allow himself to breathe fully. He spread the photographs and notes across a broken table illuminated by the faint glow of his flashlight. The silence of the gutted building vibrated around him, amplifying every thought. Van had been inside the warehouse. Van had left warnings. Van had sketched the vault. And Van had identified someone, or tried to. The figure in the sketch, the OPS jacket, the blurred face. Hale zoomed in on the photocopy of the old photograph, the one showing the man standing near Danielle's backpack. The resolution was poor, but something tugged at him. The left arm, a shape on the sleeve, a faint patch, not the OPS patch, something else, a logo, faded, oval-shaped. He enhanced the image manually on his phone, adjusting brightness and contrast until the pixelation threatened to erase the details entirely, but he saw it, just enough to freeze him. The logo wasn't OPS. It was a subcontractor badge, a private maintenance firm contracted by OPS. The company dissolved in 2004. Name, Straightworks Infrastructure Services. Hale almost whispered the name aloud. Straightworks had been under investigation once, briefly, for improper storage of hazardous materials. Nothing connected to abductions, nothing connected to OPS misconduct. But they had been granted access to municipal tunnels, sub-basements, transit shafts, and emergency infrastructure during construction expansions. Straightworks had keys to the city's underbelly, and so did anyone who kept their old patches. Hale dug deeper into his memory. He had seen their logo before, years ago, on a vest worn by a contractor during a blackout drill. He checked the sketch again. The blurred figure had thick shoulders, a broad frame, the kind of build that didn't fit Kincaid's lean, rigid form. This wasn't Kincaid. This was someone else. Someone Kincaid had worked with. Someone who might have been the real presence in the vault. He pulled up old records, scanning through rosters from Straightworks' final years. Several names, several faces, but one stood out. A maintenance supervisor noted in a brief internal memo for unauthorized access to restricted tunnels, reprimanded, then quietly cleared. The name hit him like a shockwave. Carter Lorne. Tall, broad-shouldered, worked nights, specialized in municipal sublevel routing. Last known contract date, 2003. Last known address, unknown. Hale sifted through the documents again, feeling the cold narrative forming along the edges of his mind. Kincaid wasn't the spider at the center of the web. He was the web's architect. But Lorne was the spider. The hands in the dark, the boots in the dirt, the presence behind the hatch, the watcher inside the vents, the man standing in the alley the night Danielle vanished. Hale felt the truth settle into him with a weight almost too heavy to bear. The cold case wasn't just resurfacing. It was being revived by the people who created it. He gathered the photos and shoved them into his bag. His next move was carved in stone. He had to find Carter Lorne. But before he reached the annex exit, his phone buzzed faintly, the first signal all day. One new message. No number, no signature, just a single line. Stop looking for him, followed by an image. Hale tapped it. The photo loaded. Evan, tied to the bolted chair. Head down. Alive, barely. And behind him, on the concrete wall, the symbol drawn in thick black paint. A circle, with a line through it. The photo stayed burned into Hale's vision long after the screen dimmed, the image lingering like a bruise on the inside of his skull. Evan slumped in the chair, wrists bound, the shadow of the chain disappearing into the dark edges of the frame. His head tilted sideways in a way that suggested exhaustion rather than unconsciousness. But the distinction didn't matter. What mattered was the unmistakable declaration behind him, the symbol painted in thick black slashes, bold, deliberate, territorial, a circle, with a line through it. Fresh strokes, fresh threat, fresh claim of ownership over the boy's life. Hale lowered the phone, his breath tightening into a thin coil in his chest. Whoever sent the message wasn't warning him, they were daring him, drawing him in. Positioning each move like a chess master guiding a predictable opponent. The text wasn't a deterrent, it was an invitation. And if Evan was alive, he wasn't a hostage. He was bait. Hale had walked too far into the maze to accept silence now. He stared at the cracked concrete floor, its emptiness vibrating beneath the weight of an unseen tension, the annex walls narrowing like the inside of a throat. Someone wanted him isolated, someone wanted him desperate, someone wanted him alone. He wasn't giving them that. He pulled up the message metadata, though he already knew it would be scrubbed clean. No sender ID, no tower logs, no traceable route. But something caught his eye, an auto-tagged geolocation fragment embedded in the image's EXIF data, corrupted, incomplete, but not erased. A set of 3 digits, the 4th missing. Coordinates? No. A grid reference. Chicago had hundreds, but Hale recognized the pattern. Maintenance yard indexing codes. The kind used internally by OPS and subcontractors during infrastructure expansions. This fragment pointed toward a sector near the river, Sector 14C. 4 miles from the original vault. 3 from Parker Ironworks. Close enough to be connected. Far enough to hide something bigger. Hale left the annex with purpose, moving as though the wind itself might try to hold him back. The morning air felt colder than it should have, a suffocating chill that clung to his coat like a warning he refused to hear. Traffic hummed distantly, muted by the weight of the city's anxieties, the streets thinner and quieter than usual. He entered his car, starting the engine with rigid fingers, his eyes fixed on the map displayed on the dash. Sector 14C, a cluster of decommissioned pump stations, locked tunnels, emergency overflow chambers, spaces the public never saw and OPS never advertised. Perfect terrain for someone like Carter Lorne, perfect terrain for secrets. He drove with a silence that thickened the air around him, each block passing like a countdown. As he approached the river district, the city transformed, glass towers giving way to steel skeletons, residential blocks replaced by industrial silence. Old crane arms rusted beneath the sky, water treatment towers loomed like forgotten monuments. Chain link fences rattled in the breeze with a sound that felt too much like whispers. Hale parked beneath an abandoned overpass, killing the engine and studying the structures ahead. 3 buildings stood near the water, identical, windowless, each one sinking into its own decay. A large drainage channel cut through the concrete, the river's surface dark and slow. OPS had marked these structures as inactive 10 years ago, but inactivity was a perfect disguise. He approached the first building carefully, noting the way the weeds near the entrance were bent, trampled recently. He tested the door handle, locked, heavy, industrial, but a chain hung loosely around the latch, not actually securing it. A trick, a disguise. Hale pushed lightly, and the door swung inward with a shriek of rusted hinges. He stepped inside. Darkness wrapped around him like a thick cloth, swallowing his footsteps as he advanced. The smell hit him first, damp concrete, stagnant water, and a faint metallic tang that was too familiar to ignore. The beam of his flashlight slid across walls coated in grime and peeling paint. Pipes lined the ceiling, some leaking slow drips that echoed like ticking clocks. The space felt colder than outside, as though the building breathed from deep within. He followed the corridor, stepping over debris until he reached a staircase leading downward. A faint noise echoed from below, metal dragging across stone. Soft, slow, intentional. He descended, gun drawn, every muscle taut. The stairs emptied into a wide chamber, its ceiling high, pillars rising like stone ribs. Hale swept the beam across the room, and his pulse halted. Another vault, not hidden beneath the dirt, not tucked inside a yard. This one stood exposed, unapologetic, a reinforced door welded shut from the outside. And carved into the metal was the circle and diagonal line etched deeply enough to warp the surface. But the noise didn't come from the vault. It came from the shadows to the right. Hale turned sharply, flashlight slicing through the dark, revealing a trail of footprints leading to a narrow hallway. He followed, careful, quiet, the beam inching forward until it illuminated something on the ground. A shoe. Evan's shoe. Still warm. Hale crouched, fingers grazing the fabric. He stood slowly, eyes narrowing. The air seemed to vibrate behind him. An instinct spun him around just in time to catch a blur of movement. A figure. Tall, broad, the silhouette unmistakable. Carter Lorne. The beam of Hale's flashlight struck the man's chest, revealing the faint outline of a faded patch on his jacket. Straightworks, the logo barely visible under layers of grime and time. His face was shadowed, unshaven, eyes glinting with the cold intelligence of someone who had lived too long outside the rules. He didn't move, didn't speak, just studied Hale like an animal, deciding whether the creature before it was prey or threat. Hale held his weapon steady. "Where is he?" Lorne didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the flashlight, then back to Hale's eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low, gravel soaked in something hollow. "You shouldn't be here." Hale took a step forward. "Where is Evan Royce?" A long, hollow pause, then, "Stop digging." The same message the text had carried, the same message every symbol had tried to imprint. Hale tightened his grip on the gun. "Show me where he is, now." Another moment of silence. Then Lorne stepped backward into the dark, deliberately, measured, as if guiding Hale with invisible strings. Hale followed, careful, wary, knowing this was a trap but unable to turn away. The corridor narrowed, walls curving inward, pipes humming faintly above him. The air grew warmer, thicker, tinged with something he couldn't name. Lorne slowed near a steel door and stopped, turning his head halfway so Hale could see one side of his face, scarred, tight, emotionless. He tapped the door lightly. "He's in there." Hale advanced, gun raised, preparing for anything, a confrontation, an ambush, a lie. But when he pushed the door open, what he saw didn't match any fear he had prepared for. The room was small, lit by a single dangling bulb, and empty, completely empty. No chair, no chains, no Evan, just the painted outline of the symbol on the far wall. Fresh paint, black as night, still dripping. Hale took one step inside, and the door slammed shut behind him with the force of a collapsing world. He spun, slamming into it, but it was locked, sealed from the outside. The bulb flickered overhead, casting the room in a sickly yellow glow. Hale pressed his shoulder against the door, but it didn't move. A soft click echoed from the other side. Then Lorne's voice. No one leaves once they enter. Hale backed away, pistol raised, scanning the walls. He saw something then. Small vents near the ceiling. Too small for a person, big enough for airflow. Or something else. A hiss. Faint. Steady. Gas. Hale's stomach twisted. He charged the door, slamming into it with every ounce of strength. The bulb flickered again, dimming as the hiss grew louder. He wasn't in a room. He was in a chamber designed to erase problems, a chamber designed to erase people. He dropped to the floor, covering his mouth with his sleeve, searching the walls for seams, cracks, anything. But the room was smooth, unforgiving, a perfect trap. The gas thickened, his heartbeat slowed, his vision blurred. Just before his knees buckled, he saw something written on the floor near the wall. Letters, scratched hastily, by someone desperate, by someone afraid, by someone like Van. The message blurred before he could read it fully. But one word cut through the haze before darkness swallowed him. Run.